So a lot of times people ask me, when did I realize that I was a seer? I realized that I was seeing spirit energy at the age of 3. In fact, the very first thing that I saw was a woman, and I called her Polly Angel. Now, my parents have recordings of me speaking to this woman, and it's fun to kind of go back and listen to 3-year-old Chemo speak to these individuals. And they said, oh, he's just very imaginative. He's got all these imaginary friends. But in reality, I knew that I was not speaking to an imaginary person because I knew exactly what she was wearing, what she looked like, what she smelled like, the things that she would say. I could see the information connected to her. Now, Polly Angel was not an angel, but I called her Polly Angel because her first name was Pauline. And actually, as I've gotten older, I've gone backwards and I've looked at that timeline, and she's given me her first and her last name. But I called her Polly, and I called her an angel because she was very fair. My family is of mixed origin, but she walked in the room and I could very clearly tell that there was a white woman in the room, and she had blonde hair and she just looked like an angel to me. But in this recording that my parents have of me speaking to Polly Angel, I'm saying, well, her eyes are blinking and blinking because she was crying. And I say that her skin is blue and green and red. Now, what I know now by going back in time and taking a look is that this is a woman who was in a very abusive relationship, unfortunately. And she was driving, and I knew at 3 years old that she was in a car accident. And she had been driving and she had been going through all this trauma, and there was a moment where she made a choice to wreck the car, and it ended up in her own demise. So when she would come in, she'd be this close to me. She was always really, really close. I wasn't afraid at that time in my life, but I knew that she wasn't supposed to be there. So she's the first one that I saw. But then shortly after that, my dominant guardian at the time, again, is the person who was kind of responsible for you in that time of your life. My dominant guardian comes in, and I called her Kelox. My parents laughed. They're like, where did you get that name? They thought it was because I enjoyed the story of Goldilocks and the 3 Bears. And I mixed my name and their name together. Anyway, so Kelox comes in, and Kelox looked like my mother. And Kelox moved in, and I remember having Kelox move in and moving Polly Angel out. And in this interview, I'm saying that it looks like tinfoil, because what it looked like for me is someone had taken shiny tinfoil and scrunched it up and then threw it through a ball of light. And that's what it looked like when Polly Angel left my field. And she left the field because she wasn't supposed to be there. Me as a young seer and picking up on all this information, and she wasn't allowed in. So my guardian came in and moved her out. And that guardian was actually present with me for the next several months as I was kind of growing up. And I remember that guardian would come in, and if I skinned my knee, she would pick me up. I remember her holding my hand when I was scared to walk home from school one day. I now know, by being able to look back, as that guardian is my great-great-great-grandmother on my mother's side. So my last name, Kepono, is a very specific and special name for me. Let me tell you how that name came to be, because it is not the name that I was born into. It's not my actual last name. So when I was a young child, my father, who was a genealogist, would name all of his children Hawaiian names, but by Hawaiian culture, Polynesian culture, you kind of have to sit with this information, and it's a dividing of the name, because you want the child to grow up to live up to the name, right? When I was born, I did not have a Hawaiian name. Kimo is my name, but I didn't have a Hawaiian name. And I was 3 years old, and I was in the back seat of my dad's car, and he says to me, I think it's time to name you. I think it's time to give you your Hawaiian name. And I hear him say something, so I say, yes, I want to be called Kipono. And my dad is driving, and he says, what? And I said, that's my name. My name is Kipono. And he goes, okay, that's your name. And my dad put Kipono on my birth certificate as my middle name. Well, as an adult, I wanted to change my last name to Kipono. So I call up my dad, and I say, Dad, I'm so grateful to bear your last name, but I'm going to be changing my last name to Kipono, which is my middle name. And he says, well, that just makes sense since you gave yourself that name. And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? And he says, well, you gave yourself that name. And I said, no, I remember, I have a very, very vivid memory. I was 3 years old, you were driving, I was in the back seat, you said it was time to give me my name, and then you told me my name. He goes, I never said that. And I said, you did say that. He goes, no. I asked you what you wanted to be called. Do you have any idea? And you told me my name is Kepano. But I know that I heard the name Kepano. When I go back into my past timeline, I can see that I was actually sitting next to this individual. My dad, as a genealogist, had found out that I have an ancient relative named Kepano. So I actually tap into Kepano many, many times. He is the guardian that comes and that just kind of holds the space for me. Now, when I've asked him, why did you give me your name? Why was I gifted with this name? This guardian is actually quite quiet, but he looks up at me energetically and we have the same eyes. And he was also very, very intuitive. He just happens to be a very quiet person, which I appreciate because it forces me to kind of lean in and lean forward. But my name, Kepano, is a name that I wear with great pride. I realized that there was a moment where I had to come out of the closet psychically. In fact, I was meeting in an intuitive group, and the master intuitive came in, and she says, when are you gonna step out of the closet? And I knew that I could see. I knew that I could help. But when she said that to me, just that terminology, when are you gonna come out of the closet? For me, coming out of the closet is all about bravery. It is all about being true to who you are, no matter what the circumstance is, and owning that. And when I chose to own with all the bravado that I could muster, it was so much easier than I realized. And, I actually was getting sick. I was getting sick a lot. I wasn't sleeping because I was always being disturbed energetically and psychically. That by now coming through on the other end and stepping forward and saying, well, now I've come out psychically, but here is how I can help you. All of a sudden, I sleep better, my soul has ease, because I'm stepping into my higher calling, which is to not only be a creative performer, but to also be a person who can teach you how to move into a higher timeline. We are all intuitive, every single one of us. Some of us illuminate brighter depending on how much fear we have attached to that. So for example, for me, being able to see at the age of 3 was really exciting, but after the age of 3, I became very fearful. I was a very, very fearful child, and in fact, I'm still very afraid of things, and I scare very easily. However, things would come in so much for me as an intuitive all the time. I was always seeing spirit, but I became afraid of it, so I would turn everything off. When I chose, and it was a choice, when I chose to drop my guard, and when I chose to just say energetically, what would happen if I wasn't afraid anymore? What would happen? What would I have to lose? And when I let go of my fear, everything illuminated. All those little bits of intuition were affirmed by how everything came in. And it happened so fast, and it happened so quickly that I had no choice but to speak about it.